really the intention around this really important conversation. And so one of the reasons why I am really pleased to open up today is that as we talk about how all of us, no matter what our background is, share space together and do the good work of making a home and building a home together that all of us feel welcomed in. I'm really pleased to also say that we had our land acknowledgement approved by City Council the other day. And so I am going to start that meeting with the shortened version of that land acknowledgement. And then I am going to turn it over to Chris Mitchell from our commission, who has been doing wonderful work and partnering with others in the city to do that. And so he'll lead from there. And so we start by acknowledging and honoring the Dakota Nation on whose ancestral land the city of Golden Valley is built and whose land resources we use. We commit to counteracting the erasure of the cultural practices and presence of the Dakota people through education and by amplifying a wide range of Indigenous voices. And so with that, I welcome you and turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. So I'm Chris Mitchell. I serve on the DEI Commission. Prior to that, I served for 3 years on the Human Rights Commission. Just wanted to speak a little bit to the goals of the DEI Commission. So our goal is to promote and nurture a safe and welcoming community that's dedicated to the values of equity and inclusion. And one way in which we aim to accomplish that is by hosting a quarterly forum series called Building an Equitable Golden Valley. And we're partnering with the Environmental Commission tonight to bring you tonight's forum on environmental equity. So I'll turn it over to Scott from the Environmental Commission to introduce himself and his group.
Good evening. My name is Scott Seiss, and I'm a commissioner with the Environmental Commission. So on behalf of the Environmental Commission, welcome everybody, and I'm happy to see you here tonight. So as you might imagine from our name, we advise the City Council on matters related to the environment. So that could be anything from recycling to energy use, to pollinators, native planning, to natural resources management. And so I've been lucky enough to work with Chris over the past couple of years on some of these environmental justice and climate justice topics that seem to really bring the two commissions together.
Yeah, so this event grew out of, as Scott was describing, a years-long partnership between the Environmental Commission and the DEI, and prior to that, the Human Rights Commission, to explore issues that are kind of at the intersection of the environment and diversity, equity, inclusion, and human rights. So it's actually the second event that we've hosted together. Last year, we had Dr. Mark Seeley from the University of Minnesota join us to discuss the disparate impacts of climate change in Minnesota. And we're excited to follow that up with a conversation that's going to be focused more on our community here. And before we get started, I also just wanted to say thank you to those who responded to the survey. And hopefully you'll see your questions and comments addressed, throughout this presentation. We did look over those and appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts with us. So I think with that, we have a few panelists tonight, and I will let you introduce yourselves and your roles and let you take it from there. Thank you for being here. Peggy Sue, do you want to start?
Yeah, I sure can. Thank you so much. I appreciate you all letting me join you virtually because I'm really excited about this topic. But as Eric mentioned, I am in France. My cousin is getting married, so I'm here. We had our henna day today, so I have not changed. This is this is what happens when you hire a diverse workforce, is sometimes we do crazy things like take work calls from weddings in Paris. So I'm really happy to be here. I work for the city of Hopkins as a management analyst, and I oversee our parks planning as well as our environmental planning. And so this topic was a great fit for me because I also oversee some of our racial equity work at the city as well. So I do a lot of people's jobs, but they're all jobs that really intersect well with each other. So Really excited to be here tonight. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I'm Eric Eckman, the City of Golden Valley's Environmental Resources Supervisor, and I have the great privilege to work with our Environmental Commission on a monthly basis. Scott Seiss chaired the commission a couple years ago. We have a new chair, Wendy Wyrick, who's not able to be here tonight, but Scott and Deborah on the commission have done a lot of great work with the subcommittee that's made up of creative members from the DEIC, formerly the Human Rights Commission. So Chris and Scott and Deborah and others have done really good work to kind of get us to this point, and we're just happy to partner with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission and bring you this Environmental Justice Forum. Yeah, and without further ado, we can probably get into the first presentation, which is Peggy Sue's. We're bringing that up on the screen for you now, Peggy Sue.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, thank you all again. Like I said, in my role at City Hopkins, I oversee both our parks planning, our sustainability planning, and then some of our internal racial equity work alongside our city administration. And so this is a really fun topic for me just because it's a good intersection of some of the work that I do. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of environmental justice, what that is and what it means, but also just knowing that this is a really big and dense topic. So I'm sure that there will be things that I either don't know or that you'll probably have questions on, and I really welcome questions. So please feel free, whether it's in the chat or if you need to stop and ask a question, I'm happy to. So I want to start by saying that environmental justice as a topic was advanced both at, when it started and now largely by grassroots movements of BIPOC communities. We don't have any environmental justice work that wasn't created by Black and Brown communities, really drawing attention to these issues at home in their communities and saying, hey, the things that we're experiencing are not being experienced by white communities, and it's not fair. And so the kind of people consider the father of environmental justice is Robert Bullard. He's a professor, and he really started speaking and doing research on this. And I love this quote, which is, whether by conscious design or institutional neglect, communities of color in urban ghettos, in rural poverty pockets, or on economically impoverished Native American reservations face some of the worst environmental devastation in the nation. And I really underline that, like conscious design or institutional neglect, because that's really where environmental justice and injustice or environmental racism really comes from. And we'll come back to that. So we can advance to the next slide. So through the 80s and 90s, in the 60s and 70s, kind of alongside the racial justice movements of the 50s and 60s, people started saying, hey, racism affects us in lots of ways. And one of those ways is actually through environmental design and through the siting of things like garbage dumps and sewage facilities. A study in 1984 showed that 3 of every 4 hazardous waste landfills were largely in Black communities where people were mostly below the poverty line. So for a long time, and for about 2 decades, again, this was a really grassroots movement, communities of color were saying, hey, sewage treatment plants, bad water access, mining facilities, all of these really, uses with pretty negative impacts to our community are being specifically placed in our communities. And so really making that call to action kind of led the federal government to start studying and developing a framework to advance environmental justice since about the early 90s. Now, this has been a kind of a slow process. In the 90s, there were a lot of task force, so really the government way to do this, right? We'll start some task force, we'll have different committees work on it. We'll really start beginning that research in the 2010s. We start to see a little bit more of a heavy-handed approach in really thinking about what does environmental justice look like? How does it work in processes? But what we're hearing this term a lot now is climate change, because climate change and environmental justice have a real overlap. And we'll talk about that again in a second. But that's why you're probably hearing this term a lot more, right? More than you probably heard it even when it was at its peak in the 90s, is because as we think about the climate warming and changing, there's some real severe impacts, especially in these areas that have suffered from environmental injustice. So you can move to the next slide. So I actually really like the term environmental racism, right, as the opposite of environmental justice, because this, the reason that we have to seek environmental justice is because of environmental racism. These hazards that we've placed in communities, and a variety of which, they have a disproportionate impact of environmental hazards on people of color. And so I love this chart. I'm not sure how well you can see it. It's a little small. This chart kind of shows how much more pollution Latinx and Black Americans are exposed to than they produce, compared to white Americans, who are exposed to significantly less. And this trend carries amongst kind of all environmental topics, right? In terms of waste, Black Americans and Latinx Americans create less waste than comparative white Americans. Poor residents of America create much less waste than wealthier residents. And so this trend really is across sort of all environmental topics. But in terms of like pollution exposure and some of the things that come from citing these really hazardous uses in communities, it really affects a disproportionate number of Black and Latinx Americans. You can advance to the next slide. And so what does it look like? I've offered some examples, but the siting of hazardous waste facilities in communities of color is really, again, where this started. It has its roots in really communities advocating against toxic waste facilities, garbage dumps, and other sources of environmental polluters and odorous, uses. So kind of, that garbage dump that a lot of times we're used to thinking about garbage dumps in like rural areas or not even ever seeing them. But for a long time, it was very common for it to just be in a community. Another one is the siting of highways and freeways. So this is a very common a problem that we have here in Minnesota is destroying or siting highways and freeways in communities of color. So if you're familiar with I-94 or the southern part of 35W, both of those projects were sited in communities of color, either for racial clearing or because that's where residents of color were, right? They would have, they would bear the burden of those types of projects. Highways and freeways are one of our biggest polluters, and we're learning more and more about the effects of how much and how far different pollution, either from emissions pollution or from brake dust or from tire dust, like particulate matter, how far that actually travels. The lack of investment in trees, parks, open space, so those amenities that many communities that are predominantly white have, in poor communities, that lack of investment leads to kind of compounding these negative effects of other issues. And then less access to healthy and nutritious food options, such as grocery stores. So you'll see the lack of perhaps zoning ability to put in a grocery store or a neighborhood market, and just the way that we have planned our cities. So you'll see in a lot of communities, especially communities of color, just not really the options that would be available in a majority white community. So you can go to the next slide. So what happens when we have environmental racism in our community? So we have increased risk of tons of illnesses like asthma, cancer, heart disease, again, due to that particulate matter in the air. Increased risk of heat-related illness due to lack of green spaces and impervious surfaces. A lot of these uses take up a lot of land and aren't necessarily like the most attractive uses, right? So they don't have a lot of trees and have a lot of open space, and that all of that impervious surface raises the land surface temperature, the heat of those areas. And then again, that lack of high quality water or food. Many environmental racism projects have been really about, damaging water supply or really not taking care of water supply. And so all of those things are effects that make the lives of majority non-white populations significantly worse. And this is kind of layered already on top of just general racism, right? And so racism in every sector, and it compounds. So, Black and brown folk are less likely to have good access to healthcare. They're already at an increased risk of most of these conditions. And so environmental racism multiplies that, right? So for a population that is already at a high risk of asthma or already at a high risk of heart disease, then living next to something that is that is polluting the air or is polluting your water is actually then increasing it even more. And so, I think it's really important to think about this in the context of it's not just, a population that's perfectly fine and healthy. It's a population that other systemic racism has already made in a situation where they're not at their healthiest. And then these environmental factors make it even worse. So you can go to the next slide. Oh, well, this is an old version where I was going to have a slide here, but I don't. All right. So what does this look like? And I want to show this this graphic, and I live on this map. This is North Minneapolis, and and this is a multitude of those kind of environmental racism factors that I kind of mentioned. So the biggest thing you're going to see here is a giant highway being sited all the way through this neighborhood. And this is a historically Black and brown neighborhood. And so a major arterial highway, here a US freeway is going through it. And then on the right side, I've actually highlighted every single recycling facility, the red dots. And so that is just recycling facilities, but you'll notice that most of this land is industrial land that is a pretty heavy, these are heavy uses that are putting a lot of particulate matter in the air that are probably not great for the Mississippi watershed right there, but right up against a community that has historically and is still currently been a Black and brown neighborhood. And so when we think about, again, that phrase, like either really intentionally doing this or institutional neglect, how does something like this happen? And this is how it happens. If you go to the next slide, Kiara. This is the Minneapolis redlining map. This is a map from 1930. This is a federally recognized map that allowed lenders to decide where they would allow people to purchase a home. And this was a very common practice. It was recognized by the city of Minneapolis, recognized by all home lenders. And what you'll see is kind of where that C3 is in big yellow on the north side. That is that entire area. And then that red is actually where the freeway went, right? And so the yellow indicates definitely declining and red is hazardous, which means that the homeowners loan corporation or HOLC would not have lended to someone who wanted to purchase a home in this area. And that is largely decided by how many people of color live in this area. And so that is how, if you go back to the last slide, Kiara, when something is so undesirable like that, that's how you end up with this, right? Why not build a highway? You can buy a house there anyways. It's mostly Black people. It's, who cares? We can just do this, right? And so this is where, for a long time, this was the logic that got used in these decisions, right? Is we were not really too interested in who lives here, and we are going to kind of give the worst of these facilities into kind of the most diverse neighborhoods and the neighborhoods with most people of color. Kiara, are you raising your hand?
I am.
Yeah.
This map may be familiar to folks because this is a map that we've used several times within our Just Deeds work and presentations. One of the things that I'd like to point out, because of the fact that we are talking about Minneapolis and the border, is that these neighborhoods that would border on the west side, Minneapolis, that would border Golden Valley, have racially restrictive covenants, right? So blue and green were desirable neighborhoods where you could get FHA loans, but they would also have covenants on the properties that would say only white people can live here. So even beyond this is not where you could buy a home, it was also in these same maps at the same time where we were saying what racial background you can live in them, right? So it's I get like the institutional record or by purpose, like with, you know, that all of these things tie together. And like Peggy Sue says, they layer. Okay.
Yeah, Kiara, that's such a good point, and I apologize I didn't bring up Just Deeds, right? You guys are the founding city member of Just Deeds, and you're right. I mean, to making that Golden Valley tie, the blue is where you would have been able to purchase a home if you were a white person who could have purchased a home in 1930, and it would have been restricted to only white people. And so part of these projects, if you go back to the highway, for example, a highway which we, again, kind of touching on highways, again, you're getting particulate from tires, from brake dust, from all those things, in addition to just emissions, vehicle emissions. Highways were largely slum clearing projects. You know, that's how the federal government would have classified this, right? This is in the time that I-94 was built, this wasn't a nice area. So why not put a highway here? And on the left side, the stuff that's going to be remaining. So if you go back to that slide, Kiara, with the red is where the highway was sited, and the yellow is where it's still definitely declining, right? That's still a majority population there. And so they get to bear the brunt, right, of highways are super loud, they are smelly, they are disgusting. And so you get this real nice border before you end up in Golden Valley or in this nice blue area of people who have to handle this highway. And so this is all this to say that this is a really layered and intentional process of ensuring that communities of color are the ones who kind of bear the burden of these environmental hazards. So we'll kind of keep moving on. We'll go to the next slide. So some other examples outside of Minneapolis, Flint, Michigan, you've probably heard of this. The city purchased a water source or switched its water source that was very contaminated with lead and wastewater. And it is a predominantly African-American population, and the city is no longer in a financial place to fix that problem, right? And for a long time, it was just ignored because of the population of people who live there. In Arizona, many communities are harmed in their physical health by radioactive uranium mines, and mining operations throughout the country are often very unhealthy for adjacent residents. Line 3 is a more recent example where an oil pipeline is being routed through sovereign indigenous territory. Oil pipelines are not perfect. They are notorious for having breaks and spillage. And the indigenous community there has said, we don't want that in our sovereign land. And that has not been going so well for them. And, just some levity of a tense conversation we're having, maybe this is a more popular culture reference, which is Hinkley, California, Aaron Brockovich, great 90s movie, where PG&E was contaminating groundwater. And in all of these cases, the kind of tie between all these is that they're more poor, rural, majority BIPOC communities. And so that's where you're seeing all of that really happen at the same point. This is not Los Angeles, California, right? This is not like, just a lovely ritzy area that is having something like this. These are all really similar examples of communities who are all being told to bear the burden here. We can move forward. So again, conscious design or institutional neglect. Federal and local governments have either intentionally cited environmental hazards in local communities or neglected to develop the development of amenities or solutions which offset the health issues related to environmental injustice. So this is really a big statement, right? So if it makes you feel a way in your stomach, you can sit with that for a little bit. We're gonna maybe shift a bit, but I think it's really important to think about, right? That this is something that has been intentionally designed or intentionally neglected, right? Where communities for a long time and the federal government have not dealt with this. So with that, we're gonna shift a bit and you can move forward. Is again, why are we talking about this? Why is environmental justice a buzzword or is fun? So not fun. Why are we talking about it a lot? Why are we having this great meeting today? Is because when we have a change in climate, the people who are most affected by that are going to be people who live in these environmental justice areas. So you've probably seen this graphic if you're interested at all in climate change and being active against fighting climate change. And the inside are kind of the effects. And then as we move out, kind of the causes of climate change. And on the very outside ring, I won't bore you with reading all of them, are all of the things that are increased when we have increased air pollution, when we have increased extreme heat. And you'll notice they're very similar to living within an environmental justice area, right? Somewhere that has an environmental justice concern. Asthma, heat-related illnesses, cardiovascular failure. So now we have communities who already from systemic racism are already predisposed to these conditions. They may live in a place that is adjacent to a recycling facility, is adjacent to a highway, is adjacent to any one of those environmental concerns. And so now they're at another risk. And then as we have climate change, again, another risk, right? So it's a pile on as the planet warms. And so that's why this is so important, is because those who are going to face climate change the worst are going to be communities of color who are already most predisposed to this. And so as you think about climate change, I think we asked a question in the survey as like, does everyone fare equally because of climate change, right? Does every single person, is every single person affected the same? And the answer to that is going to be no, right? So if you are wealthy enough to be in a place of having solar panels on the top of your roof, or perhaps you purchased a second home during the pandemic that is, out in a place where you could grow lots of food, or any of those things that people can do to prepare themselves for climate change. Those people are going to be much more well off than someone who can't do any of those things and are already from a health standpoint really predisposed to some of the health effects and wellness effects of climate change. So we'll take it from this note and we're going to make it into what can we do about this, right? What does environmental justice look like and what can we do? So environmental justice looks like a couple of things. One, government-led relocation or closure of toxic facilities. So this is a great example. I showed you all of those recycling facilities in North Minneapolis. We have one less. In a lawsuit with the MPCA, Northern Metals Recycling lost. They were shown to be polluting the air more than they were allowed for their regulatory limit, and they were forced to move. And this was, again, so much of this work is grassroots movement from community members like yourself who are asking and demanding for this change. And community members really said, this is not safe for us. It's not healthy. This is a facility that had a lot of fires, that was polluting just so much. And the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency sued the company and they were forced to move out of North Minneapolis. Going to the next one. Investment in transit, bike lanes, and shared mobility. So really prioritizing investments in neighborhoods where residents are already transit dependent, folks who may not have a vehicle, or folks who are really in a situation where not having to have a vehicle would both, provide many health benefits, but also would help them reduce their costs. And increased transit really helps everyone, right? Having cities that are designed to be transit rich and allow people to get things, sort of that 15-minute city concept where people can get things and what they need by walking or biking. It really reduces the health concerns for everyone, but it also makes your cities more climate friendly. And for those folks who are already dependent on these things or maybe really close to being dependent, this is the thing that can really help folks when they're teetering right on that poverty line, is not having the expense, the 10%, $10,000 a year expense of a motor vehicle. So we can go to the next one. Expansion of tree canopy, green space, and open space, particularly in areas where residents of color live, in areas of high impervious surface. I literally was just like tree canopy, looking for a photo, and I found this, which is like a perfect photo for this image, for this conversation, because this is Los Angeles. This is two communities in Los Angeles. One is a poorer, more diverse community, and one is a more white community. And look what they look like, right? where these communities, and maybe this is familiar to you, it's definitely familiar to me in Hopkins, where communities have, you know, less of this tree canopy. They don't have, you know, a bulk of street trees, and that looks really different than wealthier parts of the neighborhood. I just have to pause. This is so funny. My aunt came in here. She snapped at me and then gave me more food. It is 6:30 in the morning. All right. We'll go to the next slide. And so now we're going to talk a little bit, you know, moving from those into what does that look like when cities take action? And I work with the city of Hopkins. We're not perfect. We have a long way to go. But I want to talk a little bit about how we can do this. So Hopkins is small. We're only 19,000 people. 65% of our population rents. 90% of our residents of color are renters. We have about 38% of our community identifies as BIPOC. It's significantly higher than our neighboring communities. So 22 is St. Louis Park, 21 Edina, 17 Minnetonka. So we have kind of that lion's share of community members of color, and most of them live in rental housing, which rental housing is not always a place that is full of trees and lots of open space, and it's usually located adjacent to major roads. This may sound familiar for those of you in Golden Valley. But so it makes us think about environmental justice a little bit differently. You can advance to the next slide. So when we think about environmental justice, and I think Eric will probably show you some similar maps of his own that are more related to Golden Valley, we're thinking about it in two ways. So on the left, this is the MPCA, environmental justice concern areas, right? Areas where they have a real concern that there might be some environmental injustice. It's on the left. And they kind of use two measures to determine if somewhere is a concern for environmental justice. Whether or not there are 50% or more people of color living within that census tract, and if 40% of people reported an income less than 185% of the federal poverty level. Now, I don't know what that federal poverty level number is, but the average household income in Hopkins is about $62,000 a household. So we're not a super wealthy suburb. We don't have a lot of money. And all of our entire community is an area of environmental justice concern. And, you know, I think that there's a lot of different things that we could be thinking about in terms of environmental justice concern areas. But I do think it's important to say that the MPCA kind of calls out saying, hey, you have these populations, and as you do projects, it's really important that you think about that before you proceed with projects, right? Now, on the right side, this is a heat map provided by the Metropolitan Council of land surface temperatures on the hottest days of summer. And that red area indicates a land surface temperature, I believe, over 99 degrees. And so much of Hopkins is really hot. And that is, you know, put your hand on the pavement. That's how hot the land is. And a lot of this area is our rental communities. And we know that 90% of our residents of color live in rental communities. And so this really affects them. When it's hotter, there's an increased rate, you know, as you know, of that we just talked about, right? Asthma, key-related illnesses, heart attacks. Children learn worse when it's hot outside. It increases heating costs. There's a lot of negative effects of us having land surface temperatures that are this hot. So we kind of use this framework to do a couple of things in the city of Hopkins. You can advance. First is increasing our tree canopy. So this is a map we put together on the left side for our first ever tree sale. We took that area from the last map and translated into a map where people who lived in these high heat areas could be the first to purchase trees. So we would give them an extra week at the beginning of the tree sale, and they could purchase trees first. That way, if we ran out, the trees would go kind of to this priority area. The next is, like many communities, we're really hit hard by emerald ash borer. And so as we write grants, there's a lot of money out there for replacing trees due to emerald ash borer. We have made the commitment that as we replace trees, we're going to make them focused. It's not a one-for-one replacement. If a tree doesn't get, you know, if we pull a tree out in northern Hopkins where we have No concern about land surface temperature. It doesn't have to go back there. It can go back in these areas where we know it's too hot already. And that is a really easy switch for us. Again, we're not a super wealthy community. We're not out here planting a ton of trees, but this is a really minor solution that we can make. You can go to the next slide. Creating a bikeable and transit-ready community. So one, creating those high-quality bikeways and connections to transit. This picture on the left is the artery. This is 8th Street in downtown Hopkins. It will connect eventually downtown Hopkins to the Green Line light rail station that will be at the end of this on the south side of this photo. And this is not going to be our only bike lane that's grade separated like this. That's a really comfortable place. We plan to do more of these as we have funding allows, and that really makes it easy and accessible for folks not to have to drive the vehicle, also to be biking safe and comfortably. We are also in the middle of updating our zoning code that really focuses on dense transit-oriented development, again, so that we can reduce vehicle miles traveled, especially in those areas that are already pretty dense. As we add more density to those areas, that we're also adding the ability to have more commercial areas, so that as we add people, we also add places for them to shop or go to the doctor, or do some of those things that have those amenities, have a grocery store that they don't have to drive to. And then you can go to my next slide. And then finally, we're working with the MPCA right now on a kind of a parcel by parcel analysis of that really hot area. So that area that showed up super red on the map, we're working with LHB, which is a consultant, to look at each of these parcels and try to figure out what are the solutions that would help. Is it increased tree planting? Is it pavement painting? Is it turning back pieces of, as workers continue to work from home, turning back pavement back to native plantings or some other, even turf, right, would be better than having all this impervious surface. And while many of these parcels are industrial, they are adjacent to our BIPOC community. And so if we can reduce how much heat they're giving off, or we can just improve, what the air quality of those parcels is going to be like, that has a community benefit. This project is also going to work with residents on kind of trying to ideate solutions around what do they do when it's so hot. That high heat, again, there's a lot of health concerns with it, but there's also some real financial concerns that we have. How do people manage to turn on air conditioning when they have to make the decision between perhaps air conditioning or their grocery budget, right? How do they, where do they go and how do they want the city to help? But also, how can we, from an emergency management standpoint, be prepared for these high heat events? So this will be working with our residents as well to help us kind of find solutions that work for them. So my final slide is, we have to use this information and understand how this shows up in our cities, and make it central to our decision-making process, especially when projects are city-led. Like that EAB grant, it's so minor. Your trees don't have to go back in the hole of an EAB tree. You can put them anywhere. And so as cities are really thinking through projects, even small projects can be leveraged to affect change in these places. And cities have to be really thinking ahead about what climate change is going to mean for BIPOC populations, and how you prepare for that. Now, it is going to be tough. I have some answers and I don't have a lot of answers. But I think that there are always things that you can do. And this meeting is a really great first step. If you're really committed to having these conversations and really thinking about what this looks like in your community, I think you're in a really great place to start this work. So that's all I have. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I look forward to turning this over to Eric and seeing his presentation.
Peggy Sue, I just want to extend a special thank you for joining us while you are traveling, and I really appreciate the presentation, and again, the lengths that you've gone to be with us today. So thank you again.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. This was extremely fun to do and to talk to you about. I hope that more communities start to think about these and in the detail that you all are. So thank you so much. And I'll be here to participate in the discussions as well.
Great.
Can you all see the right presentation? Peggy, I just want to make sure this is the right presentation, that they can see it.
Yes, I can see it.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peggy Sue. And wish you could share the snacks that you were just given by your. Oh, it's because it was good.
There's a reason that I am no longer on video. I am going to eat it.
Well, so we won't try to keep you too long. I know you have to get to sleep at some point over there. But yes, I'm Eric Ekman, the Environmental Resources Supervisor for the City of Golden Valley. Pleased to be here to talk about environmental justice and equity in Golden Valley. And specifically, we're going to be trying to identify inequities with respect to green infrastructure and amenities in Golden Valley. It's kind of picking up where Peggy Sue left off. She did a great job covering environmental justice, what it is, why it's important, who it impacts the most, and who climate change impacts the most. What was interesting is we did a pre-forum survey, and I think we had about over 100 respondents, and maybe 107 or so. And about half of the survey respondents said they weren't familiar with environmental justice. So that told us we really need to focus on that, on what it is, where is it happening, who does it impact, and we also asked about climate change. Are you familiar with climate change? About 2/3 of the respondents were. About almost all, about 95% of the respondents were familiar with climate change. We've heard enough about it and a lot about it over the last couple of years, right? You can hardly go a day without hearing a news story about some kind of weather or climate catastrophe somewhere in the world, and even more specifically right here in our own region and even in Golden Valley. So most people are familiar with that, but 2/3 of respondents were concerned that climate change will affect them. 2/3 of the folks in Golden Valley who responded said, yeah, it probably will affect me. On the other hand, 1/3 believe that climate change affects us all equally. We just learned from Peggy Sue that that's not the case. In other words, people think that there's not disproportionate impacts to different populations, that there's not inequities, nothing to worry about, I guess. Let's proceed. We know that climate change will affect everyone, but not equally. Hennepin County has a really robust and complete climate action plan. I encourage everyone, if you haven't already, to go online and check out Hennepin County's climate action plan. It's the first that they've done. It's the most aggressive, I think, plan in the region and in most of the country. And we, as Golden Valley staff and residents and businesses, are partners in that. And so we're excited to help make a difference with Hennepin County. They'll lead on some things, we'll lead on others, but we're excited to partner with them on addressing environmental inequities and environmental justice and climate impacts. In the plan, they talk about some of the how we will not feel the impacts equally. Again, Peggy Sue went into this as well, but there's disparate impacts on Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with lower socioeconomic status, lower income, residents with disabilities, the youngest generations, so the very young, the very old, future generations who have no voice right now. And you look at that stat about Golden Valley, 20% of our population is 65 and older, right? So we're aging. There's a lot of folks that don't really have the ability to pay if there's a climate emergency or weather or climate event. There's some research about, do you have an emergency fund of even $400 or $500 in your bank account to pay for some repair or something that happens? Your fan blower goes out on your furnace, or a tree or tree limb falls on your roof or something. Some people, they have great insurance, right, and low deductibles, or they have money in the bank and they can pay for those things. A lot of folks can't. So this does affect people differently. Just one moment. So just to kind of go over what we maybe covered last year with Dr. Mark Seeley, just very briefly. How is the climate changing? Well, according to the Minnesota DNR Climatology Office, we're already seeing trends. There's already changes. This isn't projections in the future. This is what we're seeing. Minnesota is becoming warmer and wetter. We're having more extreme precipitation events. Our lowest temperatures are increasing faster than our high temperatures. So for example, our winters are warming 10 times faster than our summers. People, you don't really realize that. And some people who don't like winter are probably excited about that. Hey, look, our winters are getting warmer. That's great. But that has some concerns for folks in Minnesota. It affects tourism and recreation and really the culture. Our summer low temperatures are getting warmer. So while our summer highs might not be getting a lot higher yet, the summer low temperatures are getting so much warmer that we can't cool down. And so if you're someone living in these areas with extreme heat and a lot of impervious surface, a lack of trees, and maybe you don't have air conditioning, that's tough. I mean, you cannot cool down, and that speaks to some of those heat-related illnesses and other effects, other health effects. There's going to be more droughts in the future, more heat waves, more severe storms and tornadoes. Go ahead. Just a few months ago in December, Golden Valley City Council declared a climate emergency, along with 16 to 20 other communities around Minnesota, big and small, red and blue, all kinds of different communities said, you know what, the climate is affecting us here and now, and we want to do something about it. Just last year, we had record heat waves, drought, heat-related illness. Some of you may recall we had water use restrictions, like odd even watering ban for your lawns. And if the Mississippi River would have gotten lower, because that's what Golden Valley gets its drinking water from the city of Minneapolis, which gets it from the Mississippi River. If the river would have gotten lower, there would have been more of an emergency situation where we would not have been able to water our lawns or use water for anything except sort of drinking purposes and drinking and bathing. So that's a big deal. If you recall, we had wildfires last year. I know I had a camping trip that was canceled due to wildfires up in northern Minnesota. First time in 40 years, the Boundary Waters was closed, and that was why we had to detour and do something else. There was reduced air quality because of those wildfires, and because of that heat and drought that was a result of climate change. We had 25 days at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport where there was smoke present. And I think all of us remember getting notifications on our phone or on the news that there's a poor air quality alert, stay indoors. And again, if you're indoors and it's hot and you don't have air conditioning, well, how fun is that? And then you're gonna suffer from that. And I know folks with asthma that really didn't do well with the smoke and the reduced air quality. Just anecdotally, I don't have asthma, but I was outside quite a bit at a baseball tournament, and I was impacted to the point of getting headaches and had to even go inside. And it was like, I'm not even someone who has asthma, and I was impacted by it. Last December, we had 20 tornadoes. I think there was one major event that had 20 tornadoes touch down in Minnesota. That was the first time ever that we recorded tornadoes in the winter, like in the month of December, in 150 years of weather records. So just interesting things that we're seeing that we haven't seen before. We talked about the warming winters. There's 14 fewer days of ice cover on our lakes. So again, that impacts tourism and recreation. That's big dollars to the economy in the state of Minnesota, whether it's fishing or snowmobiling or skating or ice hockey or whatever it happens to be. There's some big dollars there. Of course, we had flooding and high water levels for a very wet decade right before the drought. We had one of the wettest decades on record, 2010 to 2019. 2019 was the wettest year on record at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. All of this means, more invasive species and pests, vector-borne disease, viruses carried by ticks and mosquitoes. There's more daily melt and refreeze in the winter, meaning we have to put maybe more salt down on our sidewalk or on our driveways and parking lots and things like that. That means our surface waters get impaired, right? So it's a strain on public infrastructure, on city and county and state operations, and on our finances. Globally, we have food insecurity and supply chain disruptions in areas. That affects us here too. We've all heard about that, haven't we? We can't get certain foods, or supply chains are disrupted because there's major events in other parts of the world, so that affects us here. And that that causes mass human migration as well, because if you're living somewhere where you can't feed yourselves, you can't farm, you can't do some of these things, and you have no, it affects your economy, you have to move. You have to figure out where to go for you and your family, where the climate isn't under siege, so to speak. So go ahead and advance. So it's a big deal. So we talked about who's most impacted. I won't go over that again. We found it interesting that some of the survey responses, were kind of all over the board, and some people thought, that all people are impacted equally. We talked about that. Some people thought animals were impacted. Yeah, sort of, but maybe not humans. Animals are impacted to some degree, but, and so are plants and trees and things. We'll see, there's different ranges where they can grow because of the climate changing. And then some people said no one in Golden Valley. Like, no one in Golden Valley is impacted by climate change and environmental justice. And we thought that was pretty interesting. And that's why we're here tonight. So let's find out a little bit more about Golden Valley and whether we have inequities in green infrastructure or environmental justice issues. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that folks know what green infrastructure is. When we talk about green infrastructure, what we think about is vegetation, and shade. So trees are wonderful, right? There's a lot of things that trees provide for us, for humans. And one of the big things is shade, right? That helps cool us, helps keep our energy bills down and things like that. Shrubs and perennials, native grasses, other landscaping, those are all good things too. And those are all requirements in new developments. We didn't see that historically in a lot of older developments where, we might have older apartment buildings in Golden Valley and in Hopkins. And you just don't see the elaborate landscaping and tree canopy that you see in newer developments. We think about green space and pervious surfaces like turf, and not hard surfaces. So impervious surfaces are hard surfaces like asphalt and concrete and buildings. So green infrastructure really involves the green space. Parks and open space is green space. Stormwater facilities that help with flooding, prevent flooding, because you have ponds and wetlands and rain gardens, places for the water to go. So it's not in your house and in your building or in your business. And then simple things like vegetable gardens, right? You get food from that. So if you have your own home and property, you can grow a garden. If you don't have that, because maybe you're in an apartment or a condo or something, you may not be able to have a vegetable garden. Community gardens are green infrastructure. Pollinator plots, we have a few in Golden Valley. And then just wildlife habitat in general. We can go ahead and advance, Kiara. So, does Golden Valley have is it an environmental justice area of concern? So we can see and I can look around and see, do you guys, does anyone here think that Golden Valley is an environmental justice area of concern? Not, that's right. That's the right answer. Not according to MPCA, the state agency that looks after the environment. It's because of the criteria that Peggy Sue mentioned. Is there 50% or more people of color living there? No, it doesn't look like it. Is there at least 40% of people reporting income less than 185% of the federal poverty level? The answer is no. So if you're just looking at, and then is it a federally recognized tribal area? No. So if you're just looking at those three criteria, the answer would be no. Golden Valley is not an environmental justice area of concern, and maybe we don't have an issue and we don't have to worry about it. However, the Environmental Commission, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, the subcommittee of members from those two commissions and staff wanted to dig a little deeper. So we can go ahead and advance this. We wanted to go about figuring this out. Do we have an issue with inequities with respect to green infrastructure? Go ahead and advance. So the subcommittee looked at a number of different things, and one of those was really trying to identify and look at data and identify social and environmental factors that we could consider, not just the three criteria that MPCA said we should look at, but let's dig a little deeper, look at the nuance, let's look at our community and see, are there areas that have inequities, right? And less access to open space and green space and trees. And let's map and analyze that data and in single sources, and I'll show you those maps in a minute. And then let's merge those layers together to see where there might be some potential inequities and where we could prioritize investment in the future. Go ahead and advance. So with the social factors, what the subcommittee of the two commissions looked at was the affordability of owner-occupied housing by census block in Golden Valley. We looked at the renter-occupied housing, the percent of renter-occupied housing by census block. We looked at where do we have affordable multifamily rental properties. And then what was considered but not included yet, I'm saying yet because that's something that we're still looking for information on, some feedback on, because none of this is set in stone yet, is the non-white population. It's by block group in the census, but we can look at non-white population in Golden Valley. And then, older folks that again may not have the ability or are greatly impacted by climate change, as far as their health and also financially. So age 65 and over by block group is something we're looking at as well. Go ahead, advance. So this is the owner-occupied housing, the affordable owner-occupied housing in Golden Valley. So these are, according to the census and according to Met Council affordability information. This is where these are blocks where over 50% of the homes are considered affordable. So if you're at 80% of the area median income or lower, 316,000 might seem high to some people, right? Because values have gone up so quickly in the last few years, but $316,000 and below is considered affordable in Golden Valley. So these are areas where at least 50% of the homes, again, owner-occupied homes, townhomes, condos, are affordable. Not a lot there, right? So those are social areas we're kind of looking at. Go ahead and advance. We have renter-occupied residential units. So the greater the percent, you see the kind of the purples, the dark and light purple, those are areas where we have more renter-occupied units. So again, not as much as Hopkins, right? But certainly we have areas where there is a high rental population.
Is that single family or?
The question was, is that single family or is that apartments? And really it's a combination of everything. So, but it is normalized by census block. So it's really looking block to block, census blocks. What percent of rental units do we have? And you can see with, there's a black outline in the legend that says multifamily rental property. So you can see where the apartments or the rental properties are. But then there's also, there could be there could be single family rentals because we do have single family rental license program. And so we know where the single family homes are that are rented out. It's just that within some of those blocks, there's more owner occupied than renters. So it's in that 0 to 25% range, right? So those numbers kick up a little higher when we get into more clusters of higher density rental housing. And so you kind of see that on the map here. Okay, let's advance. So this is a map showing where the affordable multifamily rental properties are in Golden Valley versus the market rate housing. So some of you are probably familiar with where some of these might be in the community, but you can see the market rate is in orange and the affordable housing is in kind of that pinkish purple color. And the affordable housing is really a combination of what people historically might have called subsidized, where there might be tax credits and vouchers involved and things. And then also sort of the more, what some people might call naturally occurring affordable housing. And I know that can be debatable how natural that is because it could have been intentional, right? That there was neglect and there was intention there to create something that was affordable. And so at any rate, that's a map showing where those are. And that was something that the subcommittee thought was important to know as we layer all these social and environmental factors. Again, some of these, and just on the side, and I think Peggy Sue mentioned this as well, and Hopkins is a lot of these older, Golden Valley has some older housing developments. And back then, a lot of times there wasn't the environmental rules and laws that there are in place now. And so you maybe had properties that were built and there weren't trees planted, right? And there wasn't a thought about flooding and stormwater management, or there wasn't a thought about how much impervious surface you put down. So as few buildings and a few parking lots. And next thing you know, there's really no green space there, right? And there's no gardens and other things. So that's kind of the reality of how this has developed historically. Let's go ahead and move on. And here, this wasn't contemplated yet in the prioritization map, but could be, so we're looking for feedback later in the breakout session, is we have the non-white population in Golden Valley. Again, this is the 2020 census, normalized by block group. In Golden Valley as a whole, I believe is somewhere between 80 and 85% non-white population. And again, doesn't...
Population.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, between 80 and 85% white population. And so we don't show up on the MPCA's map as, you know, having a community with over 50% non-white population. And so when we dig a little deeper and see, okay, what does it look like by block group, we can see that we have one census block group that's 30 to 40% non-white. We have two that are 25 to 30%, and then it kind of goes down from there and becomes whiter, you know, as you move around. But there's really only a few that are kind of over that like 25% non-white population. So that's just another data point, social data point that could be considered as we layer all these factors together. So now we'll go into some of the environmental factors. We'll just list them out and then we'll take a look at some maps. We have distance from park and school playgrounds. We have tree canopy. We have impervious area or hard surface, which is buildings, parking lots, sidewalks, things like that. Extreme heat, which Peggy Sue showed us, extreme heat in Hopkins, and we'll show you extreme heat in Golden Valley. Air quality, and then areas that are subject to flooding. Let's go ahead. So the distance from parks and schools. Golden Valley benefits from having a lot of parks and nature areas, and especially from having what some people think is the crown jewel of the Minneapolis Park and Rec system, Worth Regional Park, Theodore Worth Regional Park. And you can see that on the eastern side. There's 500 and some acres. It's, you know, wonderful. And so a lot of Golden Valley benefits from having some of these park and open spaces. However, we can see that, you know, you think about like a quarter-mile walk from your house. Can you walk like a quarter mile and get to a park and open space? The folks that are in orange, the answer is no. They can't easily get to a park and open space, a public. You can't count the Golden Valley Country Club golf course as it's kind of open space, right? But it's not accessible. It's not public. So there are areas that they're kind of inequities, or areas where people cannot quickly and easily get to parks and open space, and they can't see them from their house or their apartment building. So that's kind of an important factor. Let's go on. So this is tree canopy coverage. In Golden Valley, up until emerald ash borer hit, we enjoyed having over 40% tree canopy coverage citywide. That's really good. That's some of the tops in the area. If you look at aerial photography, I don't have a photo of that here tonight, but you'll see a lot of tree cover, you know, and especially in the residential areas, you sometimes can't even see the houses because there's just so many mature trees. So over 40% tree canopy coverage. However, if you look at the areas that are in red and orange here, those are below 40, all the way down to, you know, the red is 0 to 20% tree canopy coverage. So there are definitely areas where there's inequities when it comes to having trees, tree canopy coverage and shade. And yeah, I think there's an outline for some where the multifamily properties are located, so you can see where some of those fall, and many of them are in that red area or that orange area. So that's an issue. And so what I was also going to mention was, because of emerald ash borer, I feel we're probably under 40% already, and we'll be heading even lower soon because we're going to lose thousands of trees due to, you know, ash trees due to overplanting ash. And it's a native species, so it's prevalent anyway, like in nature areas, but we had a tendency to overplant ash trees many years ago, much like we hear about Minneapolis planted a lot of elms and they got Dutch elm disease. So then you see a street that used to have towering elms shading the street, and now they have nothing there and they have to replant. So we're losing lots of ash trees, you know, thousands of ash trees most likely at the end of all this. So that's a big deal. And we have to think about how we replant, especially in areas where there are inequities. Okay, let's move forward. So this is the percent impervious surface cover. So green is good, right? Lots of green space, lots of turf, lots of trees. And then you get to the orange and red again. And you can see where those are and where some of the multifamily properties kind of line up with those. But the areas in orange and red are over 50%, and part of the yellow, I guess, based on the numbers, but orange and red in particular, they're over 60% impervious surface coverage. And just to give you an idea of what our zoning code says, like in a single family district, if you're going to build a home and maybe put a driveway on it, maybe have a patio on the back or something, you can't cover more than 50% of your lot with impervious surface. So that kind of is a good kind of gauge for all this, is that 50% is what you're kind of limited to in a single family district. So if we apply that to all these larger sort of blocks in these other areas of the city, anything over 50, if it's hard surface, anything over 50% hard surface is probably not that good. It's going to capture heat and retain heat, right? And you can't plant there. So that's a big deal. Let's go ahead. This is extreme heat. Peggy Sue showed us what extreme heat looked like in Hopkins. Here's what it looks like in Golden Valley. And so we can nerd out on the data a little bit. You can see the range. So this was taken from Landsat satellite thermal imagery, sensor technology, and that was during a heat wave in July of 2016. So on a really hot day in July of 2016, here's what they captured. It's a range of about, you can see 74 degrees all the way up to, I'm not sure that we experienced 125 degrees in Golden Valley, probably not, but let's just say 104. So we've got a 30 degree difference here between the blue areas, and you can see where some of those are, kind of near the lakes and Theodore Wirth Park. There's some blue areas, and then all the way up to the red areas, which are some of the hottest and most impervious areas in Golden Valley. And so, just within one community, you might see 20 to 30 degree difference on hot days between one side of the city and the other, depending on where you live here. So definite inequities here when it comes to, heat. Let's go to
one thing that I noticed too is that this area up here was the same census block that had the highest concentration of people of color, and it's also in the heat map. So we're talking about these correlations that Peggy Sue illustrated on a high, very general level. We're seeing the same trends happen in Golden Valley.
That's true. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. This is air quality. So we looked at a couple different things here. One, we know that near highways, you're going to have more particulate matter, more potential pollution, right, from exhaust and automobile, dust and other things, metals and things that come off of automobiles. You're going to have noise, you're going to have other things. And so the American Lung Association says, they look at kind of 0.2 to 0.3 miles from the highway and from these other maybe pollution sources as being areas where there's some potential risk and health risks. So what we did was we kind of mapped the area near so we have 4 major highways in Golden Valley: Highway 169, Highway 100, Highway 55, and Interstate 394. And so we're a small community, right? 10.5 square miles, and a lot of that's Theodore Wirth Park. So when you take all that, when you look at that, a small community with 4 major highways, there's a lot of potential for, air pollution near those highways. And you can see that here in this map. And then you couple that with MPCA data on where there's permitted air emissions. So there's about a dozen sites that have like manufacturing, and they emit something out of their buildings, and it doesn't mean that there's violations or it's something that's really bad or anything like that. It just means that they have a permit because they emit something, something that's probably not great to breathe if you're just standing right there by the smokestack, right? So we kind of outline the area, a 0.2 mile area around those emitters, and then also a 0.3 mile area around the highways. We can move on. Then this map shows flood risk. So you can see all the areas in the dark blue are water bodies, so ponds and open water ponds and wetlands and streams and lakes. And those are good things. But then when we get too much water, which unfortunately we have been, other than the drought last year, we had the wettest decade on record, the wettest year on record, which was 2019. We've had, a number of different floods over the decades, and there's more potential with the warmer atmosphere and the wetter climate. they're predicting, scientists are predicting we're going to get more extreme weather events. We've seen them all around Golden Valley, and sometimes we've missed them, which is great. For example, Maple Grove got 9 inches of rain a few years back. We didn't, and it just narrowly missed Golden Valley, right? And so sometimes we just get lucky, but we know it's coming. At some point, we're going to get hit with a big one. And the arrows in light blue show where all of those water bodies would swell up and would store water. And some of those areas are in parks, like you see Brookview and you see Theodore Wirth. But a lot of the areas are not within parks. They're, down streets and in backyards and around homes and businesses and that type of thing. So when you couple flooding with impervious surface, lack of tree cover, extreme heat, maybe non-white population with rental properties that maybe don't have a lot of amenities. You couple all these things together and it starts to tell a story. It starts to show where there's inequities and there's a lot of vulnerability, I think, with the climate changes. Let's go ahead and move on. So what we've been working on with the subcommittee, and it's kind of just in draft form right now, so we want to share it to all of you and get some feedback, is kind of a prioritization map that really just layers all of these social and environmental factors together, and it's just a work in progress right now. Right now, it's we're going to show this to you, but it's not weighted or scored. Sometimes, and in fact, in 2020, when the subcommittee first started working on this, they said, let's weight these a certain way where it's more heavily weighted on the social factors than the environmental, and we'll kind of prioritize, right, and show what our values are, and that's good. So far, we haven't gotten to that point yet with the new revised maps that we are creating after the 2020 census. So, the old maps that we created in 2020, that was prior to the 2020 census information coming out and some more climate information that we learned after that. So now we're taking all that new data, compiling it, and trying to come up with a prioritization map for moving forward. So let's go ahead and take a look at that next. So there it is. It's purple, right? So the home of Prince, right? Minneapolis, Golden Valley. This really shows all of those. There's 3 social factors and 6 environmental factors layered upon each other with transparency turned on. So what that means is they're all shown as being equal, like in the same color, but when you layer all of them on top of each other, you start to see wherever the darkest purple areas are, that's where there's probably the most risk. There's the most inequities when it comes to green space, the less ability to adapt to climate change easily. Where you see those white areas where there's no color, so the white areas on the map and the light purple areas next to the white areas, those are areas that are probably a bit more resilient when it comes to all these factors we're looking at, and they benefit from a lot of green space and tree cover, right? And not much impervious surface, and not the air quality issues that others by the highways or near some of the emitters would experience. So you look at this and you look at those dark purple areas, and you also look at in the black outline, the affordable or the rental properties, multifamily properties. It kind of starts to tell a story. It kind of shows where we in Golden Valley should prioritize resources and investment and start to partner and build relationships with a lot of these property owners, whether it's multifamily, single family, or businesses, and we can start to make a difference. We really need to start to prioritize in these areas. So let's go ahead. So next steps, we want to learn more and hear from you tonight because we don't have all the answers. This is a work in progress. We want to work more with our subcommittee and try to finalize these prioritization maps and really figure out how much we want to weight certain factors over others, or if we even want to do that. And then we want to work with our commissions and our Minnesota Green Corps member. Tonight we have Ethan Kerberg, and he's our Green Corps member that's serving Golden Valley for 11 months. He's also a resident of Golden Valley, so it's kind of a double bonus for us staff in Golden Valley. And his term ends in July, but we do have I guess by August, right? Late July, early August. And then we are the beneficiaries of a new Green Corps member coming on board in September. So we're fortunate, and we're announcing that for maybe it's the first or second time, I guess. We just heard about that the other day. So this is kind of a formal announcement that we are getting another Green Corps member. They will be focused on helping to address these inequities and build these partnerships and relationships and move us forward so we can build green projects together in these areas and address, you know, the lack of tree cover, especially due to green or emerald ash borer that we're seeing. That's huge because this was already a big issue and something we want to tackle. But because of the loss of thousands of ash trees, it's even bigger. It's really hitting us hard. So we want to be intentional. We want to really plan for and provide access to green infrastructure in the community, improve health outcomes and quality of life for everyone. So thank you. I think that's the end for me.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we've got, I'm gonna stop sharing. So what's planned next, right, is like, breakout, like discussion, group discussions, right? I think what we could do is just do like the group in here, and then we can have the online folks have their own group too, instead of like moving all about the building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I seeing 11 participants up there?
Yeah.
Let's see what that looks like.
Yep.
So
We have 9 people on the phone or online.
yeah, we would I don't know what this means.
Great.
Okay. So I'm going to make folks panelists so they can talk, and then I'm gonna mute all of this, right? And then we'll come back in like 10 minutes so we can close out on time. Okay?
Does Peggy Sue have the questions? We just want to make sure.
Do you have what you need, Peggy Sue?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't see anyone, so everyone looks like they're maybe still attendees for me.
Yes, I'm gonna make folks panelists.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
That's okay. And I'm going to unmute. And I'm going to mute her.
All right. Hi, everyone. I can lead people through questions. And the first one is really easy, nice softball. What do you think about what you just learned and what you saw tonight? And if you guys want to turn on your cameras, I'm happy to not be the only person on camera. Hello.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, and yes.
Okay, good. I'm at the baseball field and also on WebEx, but also called in for audio. So I'm very nervous about how this is all going to work. Who else is in the room with us?
It looks like Jim Rock, Roxanne Gould, Kirsten Santellis, Shep Harris, Timothy Cruikshank, Tonya, and Cindy.
Hey.
Hi,
Hello,
everyone.
hello.
I'm at Target getting groceries with two monsters known as my children.
And Shep says his phone is about to die, but thanks for a great program. So does anyone have any reflections on the presentation tonight?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yes, I really appreciated your presentation. It was there was, I think, you highlighted the huge inequities that certain communities do and can be facing in terms of environmental justice. But my thought on this is I'm a Native person. My children are Dakota, Imo, Ojibwe, and Odawa. And I think, to me, what's most important is that whoever resides on our homelands be good stewards of our homelands. And I don't feel like that's happening in most cases today. I think that we think about what we want from these places and these spaces rather than all of the other beings that live in our ecosystems, and what they need in order to be healthy. And if they're not healthy, we're not going to be healthy. So that was some of my concern. I see in Golden Valley every day green space is being altered and changed and destroyed. It's happening just on the block here, and it's heartbreaking because where do those beings that rely on those ecosystems go when those areas are destroyed? And then in terms of animals, they end up in people's backyards and they don't necessarily want them there. So I'm very concerned about our ability to look at the bigger picture. I think we study isolated issues rather than looking at the impact more holistically. So that's my takeaway.
Definitely. Anyone else have anything they want to share?
What I really appreciated about the presentation is the looking at all of these factors together and starting to identify where are the spaces where we're sort of double down and double down and double down on inequities. And I think I'd like to see us use that information to make better decisions going forward. So taking those maps when the city's making planning decisions or decisions about, how the land is going to be used, and having that be a requirement as part of the decision-making process.
Because her and I work together. Basically, we're looking for humans, not specific people. We'll look for holes and then go, okay, we need someone, and then we text it out. So
You're not gonna go through and look at all the holes and put your name in.
no, I can't. Because we never know. We never know what, and we have to let parents fulfill their hours first.
Oh, hey, Cindy,
Yeah,
could you
parents have to do 10 to 15 hours. They have to, or they
have to have somebody. If they want to pick on it too.
yeah. Otherwise, they have to pay.
And that's part of being.
Yeah.
Well, we'll just hop over to our next
A lot.
discussion question. I wish I could mute Cindy,
Yeah.
but I'm not able to.
So like what happens is we sign up and then we
Cindy, could you please mute your
we-
phone? We're all hearing your conversation.
Oh, well, it looks like we lost Cindy. All right. Thank you. All right. So, I think maybe I'll skip around because I want to follow kind of your line of thought here, Roxanne. So kind of, what are the ways that you're interested in supporting this work, or what can the city or community do to address these inequities? What other ideas do we have around that?
They need to maintain our green spaces and treat water and trees as commons. We should have more say about the water, particularly Bassett Creek. I'm very concerned about Bassett Creek and all of the chemicals that go into Bassett Creek. It's not a healthy part of the Mississippi watershed, and it's not being destroyed by it's being destroyed by people of means, because they want their golf courses, they want their green grass lawns and so forth. And I think the city could do more to protect our green spaces and our water.
Yeah.
Hey all, this is Kirsten. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Peggy Sue, lovely to see you. I really appreciated the presentation. I think it's all a really fascinating topic. I have told anyone who will listen to me I'm reading a new book called the Intersectional Environmentalists, and it's about the racial and environmental justice as two sides of the or two joined parties. You can't do one without the other. So I thought this was a really wonderful topic, and I'm really happy that the city has such great partners to focus on this work. I think one of the first steps, as to your question about what can the city do, is really start to educate about the topic. You know, as we looked at the survey results, it was incredibly disheartening to see so many people make comments that this was, you know, leftist liberal agenda or brainwashing or what have you, and not actually address the fact that this topic is real. It has existed for centuries, and it will continue to exist until we do something about it. So I think continuing opportunities like this to provide education and spaces for people to learn and talk on top of the policy decisions that we you know, recommend to our policymakers are some of the steps that we can take.
Love that. And it's good to see you too. Anyone else have anything we can share? Looks like we're going to come back in a minute. Otherwise, I can move on to another question. You know, what do you all value in terms of green space? So trees, shrubs, grasses, prairie, other vegetation. You know, it sounds like, you know, obviously Roxanne's very interested in waterways and ponds and wetlands, but what else are folks on this call really interested in terms of green space or green amenities?
This is Kirsten again. I'm going to take the opportunity to talk while my kids are quiet. I love trees and mushrooms. I am fascinated. Maria, I think, is on the call, and she knows I keep talking about it, and she's probably like, okay, that's enough. But I love learning about how it is all connected and how they depend on each other, and so that's my area of interest.
Love that. Jim, it looked like you had something to say. Nope, we can't hear you, Jim. It looks like you're unmuted, but your sound's not working.
Okay, let's come back.
Sorry about that, Jim.
You know, having the multifamily affordable within residential areas, then you're gonna have them with the canopy. And if you put them all.
Definitely something to think about. Our environmental commission mentioned that in particular, that as we look at developing more affordable housing, because it's a priority of the councils to develop more affordable housing around the community, that we also need to think about some of the environmental factors and siting and where we're siting these developments. Because if it's right next to the highway, right, and some other environmental concern areas that we have, that might not be as good as some other.
Transportation.
Can I kindly ask everyone to mute so we can hear the main room? Thank you.
Everyone's having fun.
Oh, participate, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. We got it. You want to close out?
Sure. I'd be happy to. First of all, I want to say thank you to our panelists, Eric and Peggy Sue. Personally, one big takeaway for me is, you know, it's inspiring to see the intention behind collecting and understanding this data, and ultimately the intention that it will go into, you know, the decisions about what to do and how we use our resources. So yeah, thank you again for your leadership, both of you. And for taking the time tonight to kind of to share your knowledge and what you're doing, what you're looking at with the rest of us. Much appreciated.
Yeah, that's it. Well, thank you all so much. We did record it, so we'll be able to post this online once we get it. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on with my voice today. We'll be able to post it online. You'll be able to see it on our DEIC page with the other forums. So thank you all. Have a great night.
And I have one last thing to mention.
Oh yes, the trees.
For the people in person here, we have some tree seedlings that we can give out. But for those of you online, if you want to stop by City Hall this next week and just ask for the tree if you were here and you attended the EJ presentation, we've got a few extras. So come by and pick up a tree and plant it in your yard. So thank you all for coming.
And thank you to Ethan too for your great work.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone.